Welcome into the August 27th edition of the Nate State Show, just 2 days away from the start of college football, and today is our 138 team FBS preview. We will cover every single team in the football bowl subdivision, Division 1A, to those still using the archaic language. We are doing the entire thing. I have handmade a graphic for every single last one of these teams. Every single conference will get covered. It's going to be an amazing ride, and by the end of it, my goal is that you'll have more ball knowledge than 95% of other people who turn on a college football game all season. You're going to know things that you never thought you know about Southern Miss, about Georgia, about Georgia State, and so I am looking forward to getting into this, and we'll kind of get into the format and the graphic each time. I'm going to give about a minute to each team here as we go along here. So we're going to go conference by conference, starting with the Atlantic Coast Conference. Their big question this year is, can they get 2 playoff teams in? They have the tools to do it. They have the depth to do it, but they have to have a team that doesn't get beaten up by the other opponents. That isn't Miami, who should obviously be good enough for the college football playoff. My pick for player of the year is the Miami QB, Darian Mensah. This is kind of the format we're looking at. At the top, I have the big question for each team all year. Then I have their entire schedule laid out with a win-loss projection for every single game, which means we're covering every single game this college football season. Over 1,100 of them will be played. I got the projection there at the bottom of the schedule, and below that, I have the impact player for Boston College. It's their strong safety, KP Price, a returning production there for Bill O'Brien's squad. Now, Bill O'Brien and Boston College have had a rough 2 years together. The first year he was there started really well with an upset of Florida State. Since then, it's been rough sledding for him. However, year 3, kind of get that system in place. They really get to decide if Bill O'Brien is the guy going forward. Not the easiest schedule. A lot of good teams, a lot of Power 4 opponents listed on there. I have them at just 3-9. Maybe not the best year. Up ahead here for the Eagles. For California, can Jaron Kway Sagapulitele take the next step in his development? Last year, he played as a true freshman. This upcoming year, true sophomore season. He was pretty good last year as a freshman, and their schedule seems somewhat manageable. Still quite a bit of cross-country travel, which is going to be a big deal coming into it. But really, this whole year is about, can they develop JKS? If they can, they're in good position. If they can travel well, they could win more than 7 games. But if their travel projection pattern holds, I think they'll wind up right about 7-5. But they do beat their rival Stanford, which is obviously keeping the main thing. For Clemson, the question of the year for them is Dabo Swinney done? Last year was an outright disaster at Clemson. 7-5, barely won the Pinstripe Bowl. They had massive projections going into the year. We all thought they could be a team playing for the title, and it just didn't work out that way. They lost at home to LSU to start the season. This year they have to go to LSU. But after that, it gets a little bit more manageable before we play at Cal and then Miami back-to-back weeks. If you could somehow squeeze out a 3-1 start going into that Miami game and then upset the Canes, then we're talking. But if that doesn't happen at all, LSU's going to be done, or Clemson's going to be done early, and they're going to continue to get into this fan spiral. This 8-4 should probably be the new standard at Clemson. Fans are not going to view it that way. Duke won the ACC last year, so their big question is, a repeat possible? They lost a lot of talent, a lot of it. But Manny Diaz is still their coach, and they still have their running back, Nate Shepard, who very low center of gravity, tough runner. He is their impact player, and he could do quite well for the Duke Blue Devils this year, as he did last year, keeping the standard. Now, they have some tough games on there. They go to Georgia Tech. They go to Illinois. They go to NC State. That's 3 brutal road games. Their home schedule isn't the easiest. I have them as a mid-tier team in the ACC, just 6-6. That's because they lost so many. I mean, Duke right now is just positioned as a feeder school for football. Obviously, the school for basketball right now, but a feeder school for football. They have high academic standards. that they don't seem to be relaxing anytime soon. The stadium and facilities are kind of outdated. If Duke doesn't invest some more money into football, which is going to be tough because they have a ton of money into basketball, it's going to continue to be a lot like this for the Blue Devils. Okay, Florida State. Their question for the year is, how fired is Mike Norvell? Okay, so Mike Norvell is in deep trouble. The hottest seat in the country, bar none. Now, he still has some talent there left with wide receiver Deuce Robinson, who played really well for the Noles last year, but one of the only bright spots on a disappointing team. I think the wheels completely fall off the bus here for the Noles. They win the Week 0 game versus New Mexico State. They beat Central Arkansas. Past that, unmitigated disaster. Don't win an ACC game. It's just going to be horrible. He's going to get fired by Week 5 when they lose badly to Virginia. And I think that's kind of the way the Florida State season goes. Now, I'm much lower on the Noles than a lot of people, but quite frankly, they don't have a quarterback. They don't have an offensive line. They don't have a strong running back. Their secondary is a mess. Their linebacking core is undetermined. The defensive ends, there's a lot of injuries there in camp. They have so many questions and, quite frankly, very few answers. I think 2-10 for the Noles. Now, obviously, they may win more than that, but it's not going to be much more than that. Bowl eligibility should be a good standard for them this year. Louisville, I'm quite high on the Cardinals, but that all hinges on their quarterback, Lincoln Kienholz, their impact player. Now, Kienholz was the backup last year for Julian Sayin at Ohio State. He was a highly touted recruit. Ryan Day still quite liked him. In fact, he was quite bummed he headed out, but Julian Sayin won the starting job, and he was only a sophomore at that point, so it was going to be tough for Kienholz to get reps. He comes to Louisville. Jeff Brom is a fantastic coach. The schedule is manageable. I think they're right there at 10-2. Maybe, just maybe, there's a couple of flip games in here that I could see. They go to Georgia Tech. That's up in the air. They go to Kentucky. They should be better than Kentucky, but a road rivalry game is always brutal. This Ole Miss game on Sunday evening on Week 1 should be a real litmus test to see how good the Cardinals are. If they can hang around, they're going to be quite good. If they can win, they're going to be great CFP contenders. And if they get blown out, then obviously I'm wrong on them. All right, Georgia Tech. Now, Georgia Tech has 4 principles to their program. Run, 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 beat Georgia. Now, the 4th one has not gone well the last 2 years, but they've been darn close to beating what's been a Georgia team that's won the SEC the last 2 years. But Georgia Tech has been close to beating Georgia. They just haven't quite gotten there. They're going back between the hedges this year. You just don't really win in Sanford Stadium, so I don't have that going the way Georgia Tech hopes. But they have that run, run, run principles is going to be very attainable because they have Justice Haynes coming over from Michigan. He should be probably the best running back in the ACC. And their big question is their quarterback any good? Well, their quarterback, they haven't officially named one yet as of the current moment, but their starting quarterback should be Alberto Mendoza, younger brother of Fernando. And we just haven't seen him take too many snaps, and so we don't know how good it is. If he is good, or at least a homeless version of Haynes King, Georgia Tech's going to be right in that mix. The U is going to have a great year. They have the schedule to have a great year. They have the players to have a great year. They have the pedigree to have a great year. Their question is, can the D-line dominate? Okay, last year, Hakeem Mesidor, Ruben Bain on there. This year, kind of had to backfill there a little bit, but still pretty strong. We just don't know if they're as dominant. If they are, the U's going to be right back there in the national title game. I've seen some big shots in college football even say the U will win the title. On offense, this is going to be the best offense in the ACC, probably easily, if not the country, as they still have Mark Fletcher, Malachi Toney, and now they add Darian Mensah, a two-way quarterback who is actually a very accurate passer. This is going to be big time for the U, and that schedule is pretty manageable, especially towards the end of the year. Their final 3 games are all at home, and their other game in November is at Notre Dame. Now, that's going to be tough. That's going to be the litmus test this season. That's in Week 10. But once you get past that Notre Dame game, you finish up the coldest month of the year, all in Miami. That is a big plus for the U. Oh, boy. UNC Is UNC Bill Belichicked out of the season already? Well, there's definitely not a whole lot of hype and momentum going into it. They will be playing in 2 days' time to open the season versus TCU in Aviva Stadium in Dublin, Ireland. I don't have that going that well. Then they return home to play East Tennessee, and then they get hit with at Clemson versus Notre Dame, at Pitt, at your rival. That is brutal. That is brutal, and I think it's going to be easy for North Carolina to just check out of the season early because you're going to be looking up and you're going to be 1-5. And you're going to be going, I just don't know. Their quarterback is Billy Edwards. Billy Edwards is a decent quarterback. He's just never healthy, and I hope he stays healthy for his sake all year. But probability and pattern recognition would say he doesn't. Here is NC State. Their question is, soft schedule equals good season? NC State has the easiest schedule in the Power 4. They have a returning quarterback. They have very decent coaches, at least. Dave Dorian has done a good job there in NC State. The issue is we don't actually know if that roster's good or not because we just haven't seen them play at the ACC level yet. They lost a lot of pieces. They got a lot of pieces in the portal. Very portal-heavy team, very portal-focused team. They're going to have a strong test right away. It was announced today that Virginia has sold out Scott Stadium for the first time since 2008, for the first time since the Bush administration. And so they're going to have to go to a packed house at Virginia, who should be another very good ACC team, and then play them. They're also going to have to go to at Vanderbilt early and play Louisville at home early. If they could somehow go 3-0 in these games, NC State will challenge for the playoff. But NC State's going to have a really good record to make the playoff because the strength of schedule is just not going to be there for the pack. Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has been stuck in the same tax bracket of mid ever since Kenny Pickett headed off to the NFL. And they're not a very experienced team. Now, Pat Narduzzi is an experienced coach. I'm sure he'll have the boys ready. But the issue is the schedule doesn't exactly favor them. They have a very tough test. 1-2 there. Miami of Ohio is going to be a good team in the MAC. Another team right off the bat there, UCF. Now, I have them going 2-0 in those games, but they could easily go 0-2. And after that, that was a mistake there. I have them beating Bucknell. SMU. Does money still pay? Okay, so money is basically what SMU has. They don't have the number 1 facilities or a stadium. Now, they are in the Fort Worth area, so Dallas-Fort Worth area, so they have good recruiting. But otherwise, that is going to be a tough sell for SMU for recruiting. However, for the transfer portals, for all these players that'll all go there for 1 year, SMU is a great landing spot. You get a bag, you get good coaching, you get to go to the Kevin Jennings Recovery Center. Yes, they named their recovery center after their active current quarterback. And you get to play football. And that is why SMU is in the situation they're in. They play at Louisville early. They play versus Notre Dame. Those are the 2 tough games. I have them, well, quite frankly, losing both of those. But they go undefeated against the rest of their schedule. And they're going to be right there competing for the ACC title. If they can beat Louisville early, the ACC championship game should be theirs. Okay, does getting lucky still matter for Stanford? Now, their general manager, with much ballyhoo, is Andrew Luck. But the organization of Stanford doesn't want the Cardinal bringing in that many transfers, which makes it very tough on him. They have a brutal road schedule. Now, their defense is still headlined by middle linebacker Matt Rose. That should be a solid unit at least, but the pass defense last year for Stanford was awful. And the limited transfers, is that a sustainable model in this current era of college football? Tough to say. I think it might be a tough year for the Cardinal. They have Hawaii early. I'm super nervous about the Hawaii game. For honestly, both teams, I'll have it going to Stanford here, and then they host Elon later in the season. Other than that, should be tough road ahead for Stanford. Syracuse, I have them going 4-8. It's going to be a tough year for the Orange. Steve Angeli is still their quarterback. Again, some health concerns there. Hopefully he stays healthy all year. If he does, they could be better than this. But that first Fran Brown year, as the question for them all year, can Fran salvage Cuse again? Can he continue to beat the odds at Syracuse? His first year again was amazing. Last year, wheels were off the bus. So, which Syracuse will we get? We should find out early when they go to play California. Virginia, wahoo wah, baby. Now they have, or should have, a very good defense. Maybe a top 10 defense in the country. Still have Cam Robinson around. Still have basically all your secondary from last year. Basically have your entire coaching staff from last year still. And 1 year older, only going to get better. Also, this is the most senior O-line in the country. Also, you have a running back from Tennessee that transferred in. And so your only big questions are your wide receiver room. Matthias Marcellus is in there, so he could be quite a boon there for UVA, who has shown, if nothing else, they can develop wide receivers with Olamide Zaccheaus, Joe Reed, Malik Washington, all being drafted into the NFL over the last 7 years. And the schedule is quite manageable. You have a big game against Wake. You have a big game against SMU. If you can win those, you could go to the ACC. Virginia Tech. Is James Franklin still a rebuilder type? We haven't really seen him rebuild a program strongly since about 14 years ago with about 10 years ago with Penn State, and then a couple years before that, about 15 years ago with Vanderbilt. So it's been a little while. Is he still a rebuilder in this new era of college football? And I think it starts out quite nicely here for the Hokies. Win, 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 win against VMI, Old Dominion, Maryland, Boston College, and Pittsburgh. And then it's tough sliding the rest of the way. I think they'll pick up a win against Stanford. They haven't lost to Virginia at home in the 21st century. However, Virginia, at least on paper, is a lot better than them. So I like Tech, but I think their best player, their impact player this year, kind of sums up how I truly feel about them. Their best player, their impact player this year is their place kicker, John Love. I just don't love all the pieces together yet. I'm curious to see how James Franklin fits it together. He is quite a good coach, but I have my concerns on the Hokies. Wake Forest. They open the season versus Akron. That's actually an interesting game. Then they play at Purdue. That should be a win. And then their ACC schedule is kind of tough. They still have wide receiver Carlos Hernandez there. But for a team that actually pays a lot for their roster, they did not bring in a tremendous portal class. Jake Dickert is a good coach, but I think they're going to have some issues along the way here. I have them right about bowl eligibility 5 and 7. We will see on the Demon Deacons. Next up is the American Conference. The big question is, are they the better conference than the Pac-12? Their player of the year is their mascot, Soar the Eagle. Okay, that's sort of a joke. They have some good players. My actual prediction would be quarterback from UTSA, Owen McCown. But they brought on a new mascot. He looks pretty funny. If you want to Google him, I encourage that. Absolutely hilarious, in my opinion. Anyway, can they be a better conference than the Pac-12 in this new G6 era? That's going to be their big question this year. Army is our opening team in the American. They have a decent schedule. They have some tough games. They have that Navy game late. Navy is also figuring to be pretty good. That could be a big game. The issue is their offensive line doesn't show a ton of continuity. That is not typically the case for Army. So if they can figure that out early, Army could be quite off well. They still have their quarterback, Cade Helms, around. He did pretty well for Army last year. He can actually throw the ball downfield pretty good, which is rare for an Army QB. Charlotte, this is going to be a rough team. Their question is, can they beat an FBS team? If they can do that, that's a win. They play against the Citadel early. Other than that, all I see is L's, a 1-11 start. Quick impact player is Caden Schmitz, a linebacker controlling the defense. Um, I like Tim Albin, their coach. I just don't quite see it with this roster. East Carolina. They have quite a good receiver themselves in Brock Spalding. However, the start of their season is very difficult with a very good G6 team, Appalachian State coming, and then obviously to start the season they have to go to Alabama. If they can avoid 0-3, the schedule opens up for them. If they start rougher than that or 0-3, it's going to be a tough road ahead for the Pirates. FAU, they have quite a good quarterback here. Caden Veltkamp is his name. And Caden Veltkamp came over from Western Kentucky where he had a really good year last year. Veltkamp is quite a strong arm, and if he can just continue to process the field and read the field well, FAU is going to be right in the mix. They have a very tough schedule as far as the American go, and they're an inconsistent team. They were last year. They are just in general. If they can improve that consistency, their ceiling is competing for the American, but their floor is probably about 4-8. I have them going 6-6. The end of their schedule is brutal. They go to Tulsa, then they play South Florida, and then they go to East Carolina end of season. That's 3 extremely tough games right at the end. New faces, same Tigers. Memphis returns to try to compete for another college football playoff berth. They have wide receiver Alante Brown coming in. Basically, Memphis returned absolutely nobody, which may end up being a plus for them last year as the end of the season was kind of rough. So if the new coaching staff can be good for Memphis will compete for that G6 spot. They'll compete for the American. I have them going 10-2 with a loss to Navy, and then they have to go in week 3 to Boise State in a pretty big G6 clash. They also have to open the season at UNLV in week 0. That's honestly one of the better games of week 0, as that is the late kickoff there on Fox on Saturday. That game should be a ton of fun. Next, it's Navy. Navy, can their style still make fights? Probably yes. Navy is going to be quite good. Now, they have some unknowns, mostly in the interior of their defense, but Navy was quite good last year. They still have a decent amount of returning production. I trust the Navy system, and so I have Navy going 10-2. Now, they do have to play versus Notre Dame and at Air Force. I have those as losses. They also have to go to UTSA. I have that as a win. Those are probably the big games sticking out. Obviously, the Army game at the end of the season as well. But I think Navy could be quite a good roster. Braxton Woodson is their quarterback. He also can throw the ball downfield pretty well. So we could have slightly more exciting versions of the Service Academy teams this year coming up in the United States. Okay. Well, next is UNT. UNT had their entire roster rated when Eric Morris, their coach, left to go be the coach at Oklahoma State, who we will get to later. And honestly, he didn't leave much behind. Now, running back Jaheim White, who's kind of in a little bit of a limited role last year, will be there. But other than that, UNT is going to struggle to pick up wins. They have to open the season at Indiana and take on UNLV and then go to Texas State, which is a brutal start. After that, it gets a little easier as they have a little bit of a darling schedule as far as the American goes. I don't think it'll matter. It's going to be a tough year for the Mean Green. All right, Rice. Can they avoid getting cooked? Well, in the bottom 10, which Rice often frequents, and I believe will be frequenting this year as well, they get called Minute Rice. That's going to be right up there this year. They're going to be Minute Rice. Rice is in some trouble. They have to play Houston Christian to open the season. Then it's Notre Dame, Western Michigan, Fresno State, UTSA, East Carolina, Tulsa, Florida Atlantic, North Texas, Tulane, Temple, Army. None of those are tough outs. The only one that's even slightly manageable is at Temple, and that's going to Philadelphia at night in November. Good luck. Now, They have some depth on the defensive end. Joseph Mutombo is their impact player. He could be quite a nice player from them this year. I just don't see it with this Rice team. USF. Can Brian Hartline, former Ohio State offensive coordinator, transplant his quite successful offensive system to the G6? You have to put on so many hats as a G6 coach. And USF lost a lot of players. He had to do a lot of fundraising, but he's built himself a decent roster. They retain their place kicker, Nico Grammatica, who did quite well for them last year. Attempted at least a couple 60-yarders and kicked the game winner over Florida. And they have a decent schedule ahead of them. They do have to play Memphis and ECU and UTSA and Army. Other than that, pretty manageable. There are some toss-up games in there for sure. I have them 8-4. I think USF could be decent. Temple is going to have to fight for every inch they get. They are going to be a hard-nosed, heavy-run team. Philadelphia underdogs, although they don't really particularly gather too much support in Philadelphia. They should, but they don't. They're going to have to control every game they win. Now, that Rhode Island game to open the season, they should just win. And then, obviously, they'll host UConn later in the season, host Charlotte, host Rice. So there's wins out there for them, but it's going to be tough sledding ahead. And so I have them as 5-7. And then we got Will Hall. Will Hall is the new coach at Tulane. Tulane last year made the playoff, and they returned almost out of that team. Running back Jamuri McClure is still there for the Green Wave, obviously in a little bit more of a limited role last season. But Tulane has actually committed themselves to building a pretty good system there in New Orleans. And if they can keep the system, they can continue to have success. I just think they lost so much and are just going to reset this year and rebuild for another strong push next year. Although we'll see, because Tulane, it just feels like they're always right there when it pertains to the American. Tulsa had a big momentum mover last season when they went to Stillwater and upset Oklahoma State. The rest of the season didn't go so well, but I think they're building something. Their impact player is right tackle Cam East. Very few impact players in this list are going to be offensive linemen, but he is a stud there. I think the whole offensive line there for Tulsa could be quite good this year. Now, they're a very inexperienced team. Their question this year is youth a good thing? But, if they can propel those young players to play well, they'll transfer out. But Tulsa could be in very good position this year. The schedule is not the most foreboding, but I think they'll have quite a good year for Tulsa standards, going 7-5. UAB. Can UAB decapsize? Now, you might be thinking, Nate, decapsize isn't a word. It's not, but this is my show, my rules, and I frankly don't care. Decapsize is now a word. What does decapsize mean? Well, UAB, as an entire organization, capsized. At least in the football perspective. I mean, a total mess last year. You had a player get stabbed. You had to fire your coach, who's Trent Dilfer. You had to fire Trent Dilfer midway through the season. It was an utter disaster. You somehow still beat Memphis, who was at that point in the G6 spot to go to the playoff. I mean, went totally asunder. It was a crazy season. You retain almost none of your players from last year. It's going to be another tough rebuild. Now, you do have your quarterback, Ryder Burton, who should, in theory, be good for the Blazers, but it's just going to be a tough road ahead. I have them going 3-9. Last team in the American is the University of Texas San Antonio, the Roadrunners, meep, and they have one of the best quarterbacks, honestly, in the country, definitely a top 25 guy in Josh McCown, who has, I think this is his third year starting for the Roadrunners. He is honestly just a fantastic quarterback. He can make basically any throw. I'm surprised he hasn't been sniped yet. And I have him, obviously, as my player of the year, as I mentioned earlier. Now, their question for the year is McCown still him? Obviously, defenses like to adjust to quarterbacks in the offseason, but if he can continue progressing, UTSA is in quite a good situation. Now, I have him at 8-4, but I have him losing some toss-up games. They do have to play at Texas. That'll probably be an L. But if they can win some of those toss-up games, they will challenge and potentially win the American. Big Ten next. My player of the year in the Big Ten I think will be Oregon quarterback Dante Moore. All right, we'll start with Illinois. Can Illinois' culture overcome its talent, or, as we should be phrasing it, lack of talent? They had a lot of good players walk out the door. Now, one of the players that did not walk out the door was safety Matthew Bailey. He will anchor that defense. Most of the players that walked out the door at Illinois last year was because of graduation. They have a really good culture Brett Bielema has built. They have a favorable schedule, but some tough ones still remain on there. They have to go to the Shoe to play Ohio State. They host Oregon. They go to UCLA. If they can clean up the rest of the schedule, make it business as otherwise, and pull an upset in one of those three, we could be looking 10-2, 11-1 Illinois on a fringe playoff team. But that means they have to clean up on the rest of their schedule, which has not been something Illinois has been particularly adept at. Usually they drop a game or two along the way. I have them 9-3. Indiana's question is quite simple. Repeat? It's all there. It's all there for Indiana. I know if you've been listening to the show, you should know my thoughts on the Hoosiers. I do think they go back-to-back and win the national title. I know most people do not follow me there, but quite frankly, Indiana's system is still quite good, and their schedule is still quite manageable for the third straight year. It helps a lot that Purdue is bad for them, but they play North Texas, Howard, Western Kentucky, Northwestern, Rutgers, and Nebraska to start the season. None of those really scare me. Then they host Ohio State and have to go to the Big House. Okay, there's some questions there. Minnesota and USC at home. I like Indiana's chances. Then they have to go to Washington. That should be a tough one. But it's also a game we've seen Kurt Cignetti win in the past. And then they host Purdue. 12-0 is not only extremely possible, I think it'll happen. They still have Charlie Becker around. Josh Hoover, I think, will be developed into a less turnover-prone quarterback. And he's going to be quite good, a weapon, and a Heisman contender there for the Hoosiers. Iowa. Is Iowa genuinely mid again? It feels like Iowa is stuck in not quite total midness, but pretty close to midness. They've been stuck between 8 wins and 10 wins for 5 straight seasons. And that's not exactly the place you want to be in the portal era, in the playoff era, and they've dipped into the portal quite a bit this year, which actually worries me quite a bit because Iowa is definitely more of a recruit and develop school. That could end up working for them, the portal stuff. I just sort of doubt it. And they have, in my opinion, a very good, he's technically a linebacker, but I have him listed as IA because Iowa just puts their best defender wherever. So he's listed as Iowa in my guide here. Zach Lutmer. Zach Lutmer is just an all-around. He'll compete for All-American on defense. He's just a super good player. Ball hawk, tackle hawk. If he can stay healthy, their defense is gonna be right where they always are. That offense does concern me. Losing Mark Gronowski, their quarterback, is gonna make them inalienable worse again. But the start of the season is manageable. Northern Illinois, Iowa State, who is significantly worse. UNI, I think Iowa winds up right around 7-5. Not a great Big Ten team this year. Maryland. Is Mike Locksley done? Should have happened last year. It didn't, and they're going to pay the price this season. Only 2 wins I have for them all year. That'll be the opener against Hampton, and then they also play Rutgers on October 17th. They should pick up a dub there. Other than that, it's just losses all the way. I mean, they still have quarterback Malik Washington and nobody else. This is quite frankly not a good enough roster for the Big Ten. It's not really even a good enough roster for the ACC or Big 12. Maryland will be A bad team this year, one of the worst in the Power 4. Michigan. The question for them this year is Bryce over or Underwood? Bryce Underwood had a large problem last year of overthrowing receivers and underthrowing receivers and missing to the right side and missing to the left. Okay, quite frankly, he wasn't very good. I'm just being straight up with you guys. Not very good. But he was only a freshman. And so maybe we just hyped him too much, and coming into this year with the tutelage of Kyle Whittingham and staff, he could be better. And speaking of Kyle Whittingham, Michigan had a brutal offseason. The whole Sharon Moore debacle happened, which I'm moving fast, so I can't get into all of that, but I would like to. And quite frankly, they needed someone to bring in to be stable, maybe not a Michigan man. So they went to Utah. They took Kyle Whittingham, paid him a bunch of money, and, well, now they have stability, just like that. And, well, Michigan should be better because of it. Maybe not better than the record this year because they have a tough schedule of Oklahoma, Indiana, Oregon, and Ohio State. They have to play the top 4 teams in the Big Ten. But they're going to be a good team even if they lose those 4 games because those, honestly, that could be 5 or 4 top 5 games for Michigan this year. Michigan State, quite simple. Can they show fight? Last year they gave up. Plain as that. Just gave up. Jonathan Smith, anteceded by Mel Tucker, was a disastrous 1-2 punch for Michigan State. And through it all, they've had just chaos with GM and school leadership. It's been a disaster in the athletic department for Michigan State. Obviously, Tom Izzo continues to be the consummate man, the Michigan State man there in the basketball department. But other than that, it's been a disaster for Michigan State athletics. This year, I think they'll probably actually be better than most people think. I like some of the people they brought in. They return a very good linebacker in Jordan Hall. They have a pretty tough game to start the season, a G5 game on a Friday night versus Toledo. And now you might be looking down this schedule a little bit in my projections here. I have them 6-6 overall. And you might notice November 20th, they play Oregon at home on a Friday night. And you might notice a W next to that. That's not a typo. That is my upset pick for the year. Michigan State will beat Oregon at home on November 20th. Now, that might be far-fetched. However, you got to try something every once in a while, right? I have Michigan State getting bowl eligible this year. Here is Minnesota. Minnesota! Their question is, ski you ma. Can they continue to row the boat? And that just means keeping momentum for the program forward. PJ Fleck is a good coach, but the roster is not the greatest. But if they can just keep program momentum rolling, I think they could be quite a good team again. And just off of momentum, I have them going bowl eligible again, 6-6, but they could be better than that. I don't know if they're going to be a whole lot worse than that. I quite like their quarterback, Philip Lindsay. But Minnesota is a team that could pull some upsets this year in the Big Ten. We just haven't seen them do it too often, so I'm tentative to pull the trigger on that. Just tough schedule. Quarterback's still young, but PJ Fleck can coach, that's for sure. Does the United States truly love AC? What a confusing question for those who don't know what I'm talking about for Nebraska. Okay, let me explain. AC stands for Anthony Calandria in this case. It also stands for air conditioning, but Anthony Calandria in this case. Now, the USA loves air conditioning, but do they love Anthony Calandria? Well, they should, because he's a lot of fun to watch. Why is he fun to watch? Well, he'll do just about anything just for the fun of it. He'll try to throw into triple coverage. He'll take off on 3rd and 39. I think he'll punt if he was able to, but that also means he's exciting, and it also means he's turnover prone. So we'll see how much he's developed with Matt Rule at Nebraska. If he can cut back on those turnovers, Nebraska is going to be better than what I have them here at 5-7. They do return Isaiah Hunter, who will be a good, solid, dependable receiver for them this year. But the schedule is tough for Nebraska. I do think they can come away better than this, but I have them going 5-7. Does Northwestern have new stadium magic? Well, they could. They could. They built a new Ryan Field. It looks beautiful, by the way. Much better than the Bills' new stadium. It's small. It's compact. It means Northwestern has the most expensive ticket prices in college football this year, somehow. But this roster is not very good. They don't have a true quarterback. They have Griffin Wild as their wide receiver 1. I think from a name like Griffin Wild, you can figure out which tax bracket his parents came from. They have a very difficult start to the year with South Dakota State coming to town. Then they play Colorado, and then they play Indiana, and then they play Penn State. All 4 of those are brutal. Now, you might be wondering, but Nate, isn't South Dakota State FCS? I know the FCS still produces good teams. FCS versus Power 4 upsets still can happen. I think I'm calling my shot here. They beat Northwestern. But the whole schedule just develops tough, and they only come away with 3 wins, in my opinion. Can the talent of Ohio State overcome the schedule? This is one of the brutal Ohio State schedules I've ever seen. They have Texas, and they have Illinois, and they go to Iowa, and they go to Indiana, and to USC. They host Oregon, and they play Michigan as well. Now, I think Ohio State still will probably end up very good, maybe end up in the Big Ten title game, but it's going to be tough to get there because that's just a much more brutal schedule for Ohio State than we're used to seeing. We're used to seeing 2 or 3 big games a year. That's not what Fox thinks, but that's what pretty much the entire public thinks. This year they got between 5 and 7 big games. So a little bit of a different dynamic there for the Buckeyes. Oregon is our next team. And the question is, can the Ducks finally win it all? They have the quarterback to do it, Dante Moore. Dan Lanning is a good coach, despite what some naysayers on Twitter might think. This is not the easiest schedule. They have to play Boise State and then go to Oklahoma State to start the season. They have to play at USC. They will host a much improved UCLA. They have to play at Illinois, at Ohio State. They get Michigan and Washington at home. I do have them losing to Michigan State, as I mentioned earlier. I think that'll knock them out of the Big Ten title race. I have them right up at 10-2. They will make the playoff. This is quite a good Oregon team. They will contend for the national title. Off-season champions, does that equal wins if you're a Penn State Nittany Lion? Now, Penn State is mostly Iowa State players. A couple of players stuck around or transferred in from different places, but it's mostly Iowa State. And if we had dropped Iowa State last year with this schedule, we'd have felt quite high on the Cyclones. But to have an easy schedule, you still must win games to be considered a good team. And Penn State should win a lot of games. I have them going 10-2, losing their toughest games of the season, though, at Michigan and at Washington. If any of those two were at home, maybe we'd be talking differently. Now they will play USC at home. That'll be a whiteout game on October 10th. Looking forward to that. That'll be the first whiteout of the Matt Campbell era. Purdue, the question for Purdue is, can they just improve a little bit? I don't need to see a huge gap in improvement for Purdue. I just need to see a little bit. But this roster is terrible. One of the worst in the P4. They did not get that many pieces in the portal. They were still going through different time, like a new AD search. People don't truly believe in Barry Odom just yet. It was tough to get them to buy in after the last 2 seasons of Purdue football. Indiana's your rival. It's just a tough sell to go to Purdue right now. Linebacker Charles Correa is still sticking around for the Boilermakers, but this is gonna be a tough season, I think, ahead for Purdue. I just need to see a little bit of improvement, but 2-10, which is what I have them going, would not cut it. Rutgers, or maybe more appropriately, in a Rutgers. Greg Schiano their longtime head coach, fired just about everybody. I don't know if that helps out their roster now. They still do have Antoine Raymond, who's quite a good running back, but they don't have a great offensive line to complement him. And so I have my massive concerns. Now, they do host UMass and Howard earlier in the season, but that Big Ten schedule looks tough. A lot of good teams on there, and so I'm not feeling very good about Rutgers. UCLA, can they be fun and frisky in the first year of the Chesney era? Now, Bob Chesney made the playoff with James Madison just last year. Then he took all his talents and headed to Westwood, and he inherits Nico Iamaleava and a couple other players. If he can coach Nico up to be the player we think Nico could be or was touted to be out of high school, UCLA should be quite good. They did also bring over quite a few people from James Madison. The last time a coach left James Madison and brought a lot of the people over from the Dukes program, they did quite well. We'll see if we get a Curt Cignetti 2.0 here. Probably unlikely to happen, but if anybody was to make it happen, it could be Bob Chesney and the Bruins. Interesting schedule here. They do have to go to Eugene, to Michigan, and host USC. Other than that, very doable. USC, speaking of schedules that are not doable, welcome to the Trojans. How much does the schedule matter? Now, they have so much returning continuity, which I like, but this wasn't a great team last year. It was a good team, not a great team last year. Now, if Jaden Maiava took another step, I believe he was a sophomore last year, USC could be very good. But if he's just about the same level, USC could be in some trouble. Now, let me just run through. They're open the season pretty easily. San Jose State, Fresno State, and Louisiana. All should be wins. They go to Rutgers. They should win that, but again, they have to fly cross country. Then they come all the way back across the country and play Oregon at home. Then they play Washington at home. Then they have to go to the Whiteout in Penn State, to Wisconsin, play Ohio State, go to Indiana, Maryland, and then host UCLA at the end of that. Ouch, ouch, ouch. And considering cross-country travel is a big deal in all of this, this really hurts for USC. I have them going 7-5 and missing the. Let me just put my stamp, the Nate State Show stamp on this. USC will not make the playoffs. USC will not sniff the playoff. USC will not even be close. USC will be out of the playoff equation probably right about the time they roll into Ohio State on Halloween night. I'm going to pretty much guarantee it. By the end of Halloween night, USC's playoff hopes will be extinguished. Out of there. Not even thinking about it anymore. And don't let anybody fool you if they do rack up a ton of losses on, their strength of schedule is too tough. 3 or 4 losses is just going to be too many for this team because that means they're losing basically every big game. USC has 6 or 7 losable games on this schedule. This is not a playoff team. I don't care how good they might be a very good roster. This team isn't good enough to play this schedule good enough. That's the bottom line. Don't buy into this USC is going to the playoff. Don't buy it. There's always a trendy team every year. Always. USC is the trendy team right now. Don't buy it. Washington. Washington's organization is kind of a mess. Okay, kind of means very much so. Jed Fish is a good coach. They actually got Damon Williams, who originally transferred, to come back through some sort of mental gymnastics, I guess. But the schedule is manageable. I think I have them kind of as a mid Big Ten team. I'm going 9-3, so a little bit upper end there, and the schedule is doable. But there's definitely some losable games out there. They opened the season at home versus Washington State in the Apple Cup. If they can win that game by a lot like they did last year, we could be having some good discussions about Washington. If that game's close, this roster is not very good, and it could honestly be either. The end of the season's brutal. Penn State, Indiana, and Oregon in 3 out of their final 4 weeks. They could be definitely in the CFP discussion before heading into that stretch, but I think they'll be well and out of it by the end of it. Wisconsin. If Wisconsin offense is any good, this is going to be a half-decent team. I still somehow, some way believe in Luke Fickell as a coach. I know he hasn't shown it in like 4 years, but I think Wisconsin just had things just off, and they finally got them back aligned. If that offense can show life, this could be a pretty good team. If they can hang around at the neutral site game in Lambeau Field against Notre Dame early in that early Sunday night game in Week 1, pretty good team. If they can beat UCLA and beat Iowa, this Wisconsin team is going to be a formidable opponent to just about everybody. Linebacker Mason Posa still around that Badger program. He'll kind of be that Badger free floater that we always feel like we see. And so that wraps up the Big Ten. Heading on to the Big 12, their big question is, do they have anybody that can be a title contender for them this year? Doesn't have anybody that particularly sticks out right now as a team that we can hard stamp that can be right there in the mix for the title. Now, Texas Tech's going to be good. BYU's going to be good. I think Utah's going to be quite good. Arizona might be quite good. But are any of those teams in the national title tier? Tough to say. Arizona's question, how far can Fafita go? Now, their quarterback, Noah Fafita, has played quite well the last 2 years for Arizona, but he's going to have to drag this roster. Basically, if they want to make the Big 12 title game, he's going to have to carry them. They go to BYU early. They play at Texas Tech. Then they play at Kansas State. I have those all 3 as losses. If they can win one or two of those 3 games, they'll be in good position to go to Dallas at the end of the season. Arizona State. My question for them is Cutter loose. Can Cutter Boley be the guy that we've hoped he could be when we saw him burst onto the scene last year at Kentucky? If he can be as good as he was at the end of last year, Arizona State could be pretty good. If he's just what we saw, if he's just another sophomore Power 4 starter, they're just going to be mid. I don't think Kenny Dillingham is going to let them be bad in any stretch of the imagination. The schedule is quite doable, but they still have some tough games on there. If they can win some of those toss-ups, this could be a pretty good squad, one that is in the CFP fringe discussion when it comes to November. Baylor, does the DJ still play the hits? Play the hits, my man, play the hits. Well, DJ Lagway is now the quarterback at Baylor. And the coach is still Dave Aranda, and they still have some other players poking around. But the roster just isn't what Baylor used to be. And that should be concerning for the Bears. I don't know if it's because of this NIL era. And then they should be, honestly, they're a Texas school. They have a ton of oil money. They should probably be competing a little bit better than they have. But it doesn't feel like that organization has fully aligned yet. And it's definitely been cost them in the wins-losses department. 2 years ago, they were a very good team in the Big 12. Last year, they were not. This year, they opened the season versus Auburn in Atlanta. It is going to be tricky for Baylor if they're not able to win that game, and they have a pretty difficult Big 12 schedule. Is that chutzpah still there for the Bears that felt like it was 5 years ago? I don't know. They're going to have to just honestly be better as an organization and likely let go of Dave Aranda if they don't even crack 7-8 wins this year. I have them going 4-8 and probably firing Dave Aranda, but I think if Aranda wants to keep his job, it has to be 8 wins at minimum. BYU, Bear Bachmeier was a freshman last year. If he took another step, this is a team that will be in the Big 12 title game again and will be competing for the college football playoff. They do have some tricky games. They play Arizona. They play at Utah. Other than that, seems pretty manageable. I do see that they play or host Notre Dame in the middle of the season. That should be a big-time game, but immediately have to fly across the country after that and play UCF. That'll be tricky. I actually have them beating Notre Dame and then immediately losing to UCF. I could see that easily flipping the other way too. If they can somehow find a way to 11-1 through all of this, they should be in the CFP this year. Cincinnati, can they avoid the Sorsby slaw? Sorsby has left college football in general now because of the gambling allegations, but he left Cincinnati to go to Texas Tech. Cincinnati does not have a serviceable quarterback behind that. Now, the offensive line should be decent for Cincinnati, so the running game's going to have to be quite good, but that means they have to direct terms against teams like Arizona and Texas Tech and Utah and BYU. Tough teams to direct the terms of the game against. I think Cincinnati will be a mid-team, end up right about 5-7. Their impact player this year is the center, Taron Tao, a good returning starter from last year who could put in quality snaps for the Bearcats as well as direct the interior of that offense. Colorado, they are looking rather small, and Deion Sanders is making headlines himself, honestly, to take some pressure off this team. It's already been a rough start to the preseason for Colorado. Can they become Buffalo Soldiers? Can they find a way to fight? The early part of the season is tough sledding. They have to go to Georgia Tech, to Northwestern, to Baylor. Then they host Texas Tech, Utah. Then you go to Oklahoma State. So by October 24th, you're just toast. Even if they win some of those, they're just toast. I think the wheels fall off the bus, and I think this will probably be the last year for Deion at CU. Willie Fritz, the coach. Will Houston go on the Fritz? Well, that could mean two things for Houston. That could either mean a good thing, Willie Fritz continues to build this program back, or it means they kind of Fritz out and they slide back to where they were when they still were in the American, which is occasionally a good program, but mostly just mid. All right, so my projection for them this year is 10-2, but they will miss the Big 12 championship game. They have to go to Utah and to Texas Tech. Other than that, it's pretty manageable. It's a good schedule. If they can pull an upset along the way here, they could absolutely find themselves in Dallas by season's end. Connor Weigman, still the quarterback there for Houston. He is a dual threat. He has a big arm. If he can just continue to be as cerebral as he was last year, which is what he lacked starting at Texas A&M, University of Houston should be a good team. The team that will not be so good this year is the Cyclones of Iowa State. Now, they held on to defensive back Drew Sturges and about nobody else. Most of everybody else, including their coach, Matt Campbell, headed off to be a Penn State Nittany Lion. And they left behind a Cyclone program which, well, has a tough schedule, has, well, not as much money clearly as Penn State does, that has a rival in Iowa who should be quite good. It's just a tough road ahead here for the Clones as they try to get back on track. They were a 10-win team just 2 seasons ago. Last year was a little tougher. This team will play at Iowa. They'll play Utah. They'll play BYU all before Halloween. Arizona, Oklahoma State. So by the time Halloween rolls through, this should be a pretty desolate team. I'm thinking 3-9 this season for the Clones. Kansas, it starts all right, where they play LIU, and then they host their rival in Missouri. Glad the Border Roar is back. And then they go to London, why on earth do they go to London? Like, why do we have a Big 12 game in London? I get you're saying grow the game. I get it in week 0 when you go to Ireland. I kind of support that because week 0 is kind of like an appetizer slate anyway. But going to London in week 3, it just seems really weird to me. And I know you get big noon kickoff there or whatever. It's just so strange to me why we're playing just a random week 3 game in London. Maybe some higher power from the Big 12 offices can explain it to me, but this is part of the reason why the Big 12 continues to fall to 4th in the conference race, because they just make these boneheaded decisions like sending 2 teams to London. We'll just say Kansas loses this game, then they have to fly back 8-10 hours to Lawrence, Kansas, and take a week off and then play Middle Tennessee, and then they have to roll into the rest of the Big 12 schedule. It just kind of disrupts their season before it really gets started. I dislike it. I have Kansas going 5-7, some good defensive depth for Kansas, which is why the question is, does defensive depth matter? Because Kansas has it. If it does matter, Kansas should be a little better than this and bowl eligible. If it doesn't matter as much, Kansas could be worse than this. 5-7 is what I have the Jayhawks. Does Kansas State still roll with 12 personnel? Well, they have Colin Klein now as their coach, former Kansas State legend. And Colin Klein is probably going to return Kansas State to what he knows. They still have Avery Johnson, the quarterback, very up and down quarterback there for the Wildcats. And actually a favorable schedule. They start decently easy with Nicole's, hosting Washington State, hosting Tulane, and then going to Cincinnati. Gets a little tougher after that, but I think Kansas State, if they can just find a way to stay consistent throughout the whole season, could find themselves into the playoff discussion in late November, maybe early November. If they can return to the Kansas State that has been, they could be quite a good roster. If they are not so consistent, it might still be a rough rebuilding year there for the Wildcats. Oklahoma State, they took a ton of players from North Texas, University of North Texas, and more. But all the big names are from UNT there. They have Drew Mestermaker, who's going to be one of the better quarterbacks in the country. But more importantly, they have running back Caleb Hawkins, who's going to be one of the better running backs in the country. They have depth at the wide receiver room. So the only question is that defense serviceable? If it is, they will compete for the Big 12 title. If it isn't, and I really don't know if it will be, they're going to be mid to good. I have them as 9-3 with losses to Kansas State, Houston, and Oregon. But if that Oregon game is going to be a true litmus test early, if they can hang around for a half or 3/4, they will be a good team in the Big 12. Remember last year they lost 66-3 in that game. So anything better than that is a win. TCU, does loss of their stars equal a lot of losses on the field? So, boy, this is a terrible graphic. My apologies. TCU doesn't have too many of their stars from last year's roster remaining, but they have a lot of those backups or those no-names, and they can still continue to be good. I think there is a strong dividing line between the haves and the have-nots in the Big 12. I think TCU is a little bit closer to a have. I have them going 8-4. Running back Jeremy Payne, tough-nosed runner, should still be a force there for the Horned Frogs. Texas Tech, are they loading up on a revenge tour? If they can beat Houston in Week 3, all bets are off for this team. The only loss I'm taking is November 14th at Oklahoma State. Other than that, I feel like should be fairly smooth sailing for the Red Raiders. One of the easier schedules in the Power 4. I did see a statistic from FPI which thinks they have the easiest schedule in the Power 4. The little model that I was basing my calculations off of had them as the third easiest schedule in the Power 4. Point is, easy schedule, good team. This will be a playoff team, even if their impact player, which if you're listening later on the podcast, yeah, you're going to I'm just going to tell you the impact players. Quarterback Will Hammond. I know they just had Thomas Castellanos transfer in. We'll see where he fits in the mix of all of this. With the whole mess of the fifth years now, we're suddenly returning to college football and all of that. Texas Tech, again, bends the rules a little bit. We know that. But if you're looking at the graphic, you'll see that I have impact player being QB Brendan Soares ... Will Hammond. We're just switching it up. And maybe by season's end we'll have impact player quarterback Brendan Soares. Never mind quarterback Will Hammond. Nope. Well, never mind quarterback Thomas Castellanos. Maybe that'll happen. We shall see with this Red Raider squad. UCF. The UCF Knights are really firmly in the middle. We just don't know how UCF's going to look. They could pull some upsets. They could be terrible. They could be good. I just don't know how Scott Frost is going to treat this roster, if UCF will be a team that just is competing week in or week out, or if, like last year, they're extremely inconsistent. I just don't know. They do have a new quarterback in Alonzo Barnett III, who played at James Madison last year. He could be quite good for the Knights. Or maybe he's not a Power 4 quarterback. I just really don't know on this UCF team. And so I have him going 6-6 as just a total guess. Utah, I really like this Utah squad. Really like them. They start the season versus Idaho, then they play Arkansas. And if they beat Arkansas, then they can say they have an SEC win. Everybody's going to be like, oh, but it's Arkansas. And they're going to be like, we have an SEC win, which they could probably use in discussions because I think they'll be a fringe playoff team if they can. They have 3, honestly, brutal games in a row in November. They have BYU, at Arizona, at TCU. If they can go win there, this will be a team that's in Dallas at the season's end, that's in likely the college football playoff. If they drop one or two of those, the path to Dallas gets a lot trickier, and the path to college football playoff means you're going to have to win that game in Dallas, the Big 12 championship game. Finally, in the Big 12, it is West Virginia. Almost heaven, West Virginia, Blue Ridge Mountains, and hopefully some good football. Although I don't find that to be that likely. They have a non-conference of Coastal Carolina, UT Martin, and a neutral site game in Charlotte against Virginia. If you can make it out of there 2-1 heading into Big 12 play, that's probably a win. Big 12 play has not been kind to you the last couple of years. I have them going 4-8. That's going to be pretty close to their ceiling, unfortunately. I like Scotty Fox, the quarterback. He's their impact player. I just don't quite see the vision with this roster. Now, you can pick up some momentum. You got Iowa State early. You have Oklahoma State maybe before they figure things out. You have Cincinnati early. But you got TCU, Texas Tech, Houston, and Utah late. It's just a tough sell for this year for me, for WVU. Up next is Conference USA. Starting with Delaware. Delaware, the question is, can they sustain FBS success? Now, Delaware has a roster basically with just transfers on the defensive side. On the offensive side, quite a bit of continuity. Their offense happened to be the better part of that team last year. So I could see an argument where Delaware is quite good and competing for the Conference USA title, but I have them just a little bit more mid than that. I have them going 8-4. Actually, I have them winning that game at New Mexico State later. That is a typo. So 8-4. I know it says 7-5 on there, but 8-4. So that is my opinion on the Delaware Blue Hens. FIU, not FAU, FIU, Florida International, sponsored by Pitbull. Their question for this year is, will this large quarterback that they're bringing in work? He's just a unit. They have somewhat foreboding of a schedule. They do have to play at Liberty and at Kennesaw State and at Delaware. So some chances for some losses late. But if they can make up with some goodwill early, this should be a roster that makes a bowl, which is a win for Florida International. Jacksonville State. Last year, 2 years ago, they won the Conference USA. Last year, they make the conference title game. Completely heartbreaking loss to Kennesaw State. However, this is a roster that should be resilient. They bring back wide receiver DeAndre Johnson. It should be a fast roster. Should continue to have the same style. And they have an early test at North Dakota State. That game should be one of the bigger games in week 0. And they'll get some national attention early. So an all-around win for the Gamecocks there. I have them going 9-3 and competing for the Conference USA again. Kennesaw State came from nowhere to win Conference USA last year, and their question is, can they do it again? And their start to the season is manageable with West Georgia and Georgia State. However, this is a roster which lost basically everybody, which happens in specifically the G6. They lost quarterback, they lost running back, they lost pretty much the entire receiver room, they lost most of the defensive secondary. It's just going to be a really tough road to replacing that. They have some tough games on the schedule too. I think this will be a mediocre team. I do like the coaching staff. They do have still a good player in defensive end, Donovan Westmoreland. But the road ahead for Kennesaw State is definitely difficult with them losing pretty much everybody. They do have a grass field, though, which I like. Liberty. LU has kind of lost their Conference USA plot the last 2 years. Before that, they were always competing, whether they were an independent or the first couple of years in Conference USA. They made a New Year's Six Bowl when that was still a thing as Conference USA champion back in 2023. And LU, since then, 2 very disappointing years. This year, they have a good enough roster to get back to where they were, but they have some tough games. They play early November at New Mexico State, who will not be a good team, but that's been a game Liberty has consistently proven they're not able to win. So if they can win that game, and they can beat Delaware on the road, and they can beat James Madison early, there is a path to an undefeated Liberty team here. But it's a brutal path, and it's a tough path, and it's a narrow path. But if they can stay on the straight and narrow way and not veer too much to the left or too much to the right, then that straight and narrow path could lead them, if they get some other breaks going their way, to potentially be a team that competes for the CFP. Middle Tennessee State. This is not going to be a team that competes for the CFP. This is going to be a team that is quite in rough shape. The last 2 years, they've gone 3-9. This year, I have them going 3-9. They have Murray State, Nevada early. Other than that, not a whole lot of chances for wins in conference. They do host New Mexico State late. Maybe they can pick one up there, but this is not my favorite roster in the sport. Impact player is Zion Simpson-Smith, but even he's going to have a limited impact this year in a defensive spot. So I just don't love the whole makeup of this roster. Missouri State won the prestigious Xbox Bowl last year. They lost the Xbox Bowl last year. You cannot come back to the next season after just merely losing the Xbox Bowl. That is a gut punch to a program. A brutal gut punch. How can you just rebound after losing the Xbox Bowl? If you don't know what the Xbox Bowl is, it was a one-time bowl played in a high school dome in the middle of nowhere, Texas. And the dome looked like a warehouse, just with some turf on the covering of it. And it was completely a makeshift bowl that they kind of made up for one season. I thought it was hilarious. Master Chief presented a trophy, and so there will be Xbox Bowl jokes throughout the season. Anyway, this is not an easy schedule for Conference USA standards. They have a manageable non-con. I just don't love their conference schedule. I think they could be maybe a little bit better than this. But Jared Lloyd's the impact player. He's the linebacker. He'll be the defensive play caller there on the field for Missouri State, who's going to have a young defense this year of mostly freshman, sophomore, junior, very few seniors. Missouri State, if that potential turns out to be all right, could be bowl eligible. That's going to have to be the goal. New Mexico State, they are a team which is going to struggle. JUCO, is JUCO still the answer? It's just hard to tell if it is in this different era. In a previous era, JUCO was a lot better because you had to wait 2 years to transfer. But if you went and played JUCO for a season, then that transfer that counted as your year, and you could just transfer directly back in. So New Mexico State would always find diamonds in the rough. Now that's no longer the case. So can you still find that diamond? Tough to say for the Aggies. If they can find some diamonds, they'll be better than this, but this roster isn't very good. I have them going 2-10. For the mission for San Houston State is very simple. Just take another small step. 2 years ago, you were so bad that nobody turned up to one of your games. Literally like an attendance of like 20. Last year, slightly better. This year, if they can go 3-9, that's a win. Phil Longo continues to just step after step in a slow rebuild. If you can finally just get the momentum rolling on the program, then Sam Houston State can definitely show everybody what they used to be in the FCS, which is a program with some teeth. Western Kentucky, are they still on tops? Last year, a little bit disappointing for WKU. Specifically, the early stage of the conference season was tough, but Western Kentucky can still bounce strong. And honestly, I think they can win Conference USA. I think I have them winning Conference USA. Their games against Georgia and Indiana in back-to-back weeks is tough, but I like their odds against Nevada, and I like their odds against Mercyhurst. I think they'll go 2-2 in the non-con. There's only really one strongly losable game here in the conference schedule. That's at Liberty. If they can win that, they'll easily be in the CUSA championship game and heading towards quite a nice bowl game for themselves. Up next is our FBS Independents. That might be the best looking graphic all day. Notre Dame, can they go undefeated? Good question. They have the talent on the roster, a very good defense. CJ Carr is the quarterback still. If he can have basically a similar season than last year, they could definitely go undefeated. They have 3 tough games on their schedule at BYU versus Miami versus SMU. If they go 3-0 there, probably be undefeated. If they lose at BYU, which I have them doing, then I'm going to be absolutely right, which I would feel great about. But I think they can go 11-1 and still make a bye in the college football playoff. Just overall, due to the rule change, they just need to be in the top 12 whatsoever, and they will be in the college football playoff. No getting bounced for conference rules or whatnot. Okay, UConn. You might be noticing for the FBS Independents, I'm using alternate logos. That is correct. I think this alternate logo for UConn is absolutely hilarious. I made this graphic, and then just a few days after that, they announced this will be their midfield logo for the year, so I'm feeling rather vindicated. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look up UConn alternate logo. It is a husky who looks quite upset for some apparent reason, and I think it's absolutely hilarious. So, UConn has a decent path to start the season. I think they probably start at 7-0, and then they finish UNC, JMU, Old Dominion, Wyoming. Air Force, UNC, James Madison, Old Dominion, Wyoming. That is a brutal end to the season. They basically brought everybody over from Toledo, and they get dropped into what should be a very brutal end of the season, especially as it gets colder in Connecticut there. Linebacker is Kevon Sherman. He is the impact player. He should actually be pretty good for the Huskies this year, as, again, one of those center of the defensive type players. You might be noticing I have a lot of linebackers as impact players. That's because linebackers control the defense, especially in college, and really are able to direct where other linebackers and corners need to go. So Kevon Sherman should be a little bit of a shot caller there on the defensive side for the Huskies. The MAC. The question is Sac State a big mistake? And their impact player this year, the player of the year I have, is going to be Western Michigan quarterback Brock Lowry. He is my pick for preseason player of the year there in the MAC. So, Akron. Akron, to start things off, they have brought in a quarterback, Reese Puffenberger. Now, 3 years ago, gosh, time flies, he played at UAlbany in the FCS, and he actually led the Great Danes to a semifinal appearance in the FCS playoffs. In the quarterfinals, they went to the Kibbe Dome at the University of Idaho and upset the Vandals in a game they were never even supposed to be in there in the quarterfinals. And then Reese transferred off. He transferred to Miami, where he lost the starting job to Cam Ward. Then he transferred to North Texas, where he lost the job, I guess, somewhat appropriately to Drew Mestemaker, who ended up having a fantastic year last year. Then they play Wake Forest there to open the season, and Minnesota as well. But I'm going to bring up September 12th versus Robert Morris. Why would I bring up Akron versus Robert Morris? Well, Akron got a genius promotion where if you bought suite level tickets, season tickets for Akron that year, then you would be entered in to a promotion where you'd get to be the offensive coordinator for the first drive for their first home game, which happens to be against Robert Morris that season. And a lot of big names entered. Barstool Big Cat. Bordeaux is a famous college football YouTuber. Tyler Budge at CFB Budge, who's a big shot YouTuber as well. And quite frankly, they did a really good job on the draw. They made some of those big names to get into their final 10. And then they decided that it would go to, this was supposed to be a randomized draw. None of these draws are actually randomized. I feel like everybody knows that. And they decided to give it to a lifelong Akron fan who will be calling, just a random fan will be their offensive coordinator for a drive for Akron against Robert Morris. That'll be a 3:30 kickoff on September 12th. And so that might be a rather widely watched first drive, or at least widely posted. So we'll see what the Akron fan can scheme up there. They also play UNLV in the non-con, so a very brutal non-conference. This is going to be a good team. I have them going 6-6, but they're probably better than that. But it is just a tough schedule. All right, so Ball State is historically very good in the MAC, but the last couple of years have been bad. They do return wide receiver Donovan Hamilton, but other than that, not a lot of continuity. It's going to be a tough sell this year for Ball State. I have them going 4-8. Bowling Green. Bowling Green will return running back Austin Dendy, who was a strong, hard-nosed runner last year for the Falcons. But more importantly, Austin Novosad. Yes, let me see if I'm pronouncing. Yes, Austin Novosad. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. For Oregon, was a 3-time backup quarterback for Oregon. He lost the job, I believe, not only to Dante Moore, but also he lost it to Dylan Gabriel before that, which is, brutal. Okay, I'm getting my shot now. Oh, no, wait, I have an NFL quarterback. Oh, I'm getting my shot now. Oh, wait, no, I have the Heisman favorite. Bad luck. Bad luck for Austin Novosad. And now he gets a shot at Bowling Green. They open the season versus what will be a very good FCS team in Tarleton State. Then they go to Nebraska and to Iowa State. I have them going 7-5 this season. UAlbany will play Buffalo to start the season. Now, Buffalo is going to have a little bit of a tough year. 2 years ago, they were quite a good team, but we feel further and further away from that now. Buffalo corner does actually have a really good secondary, led by cornerback Savion Brown. But how far can a secondary take you when the rest of your roster is just kind of mid to poor for even G6 standards? I guess that'll be the question for the Bulls this year. Central Michigan, can they challenge the top of the MAC? It's been about 7 years since Central Michigan has won the MAC, has really even competed for the MAC. Recently, it's been just a bunch of rebuilds in a row for the Chippewas, but this year finally feels like a little bit of a better year. Wyoming will be a non-conference game, as well as New Mexico, and Miami as well. Miami, Florida, not Miami, Ohio. The actual top 10 Miami, they'll have to go to Miami to play that. So it'll be a brutal non-conference. If they can come out of there 2-2, they'll probably be feeling pretty all right. I have them 8-4 and competing there for the MAC. Is Chris Creighton still the guy? Well, that should be something we find out this year for the Eastern Michigan Eagles. Now, EMU should probably be the Emus. Why they don't switch it from the Eagles to the Emus, I have no idea, because that feels way too obvious. But Eastern Michigan is a very rough place to get recruits to. Chris Creighton's been there forever. It finally feels like people are starting to sour on him a little bit after he rebuilt that program from nothing so many years ago. Now, he still has a decent quarterback in Noah Kim, but the schedule is not the best as far as MAC standards go, and they have to open the season with a win versus Sacramento State. Otherwise, it could get real turbulent this year in Yaplansty. All right, it is Kent State time. Is Kent State still DeRealist? Now, you may be wondering, Nate, why did you spell DeRealist that way? Yes, I spelt DeRealist that way, D-A''REALYST, because their wide receiver / kick returner's name is DeRealist Clark, spelled the same way. That dude is fast. And now, Kent State as a whole probably won't be too good. They do have Drew DeShields returning as a QB, but that is a fun name to say. And I'm happy DeRealist is still a golden flash. Their ceiling should probably be below eligibility. I have them going 4-8. Miami, Ohio has appeared the last 3 MAC championship games. So the question is the system at Miami of Ohio still the system? Can they continue to be consistent? I have them going 6-6, so this year is definitely a downgrade over the last couple of years. But Miami of Ohio is still, in my opinion, an excellent roster. But they just don't have the same level of quarterback and running back play. That defense should still be very good, but you got to have an offense. And the opening of the season where you play at Pitt and at Cincinnati is going to be tough to deal with as well. So this year, I think that MAC championship streak gets broken, and they still make bowl eligibility, though. Very good roster there. Very good program there, Miami of Ohio. Ohio, less of a good organization. They had a situation where their former coach, got a bunch of allegations leveled against him. Probably true. Looks like some harassment cases, some stalking cases. Not good there in Athens, Ohio. So as far as the roster goes, a lot of mass exodus going on. Jack Fry's still there at Ohio, but it's going to be a rough season there in Athens. No more Parker Navarro, and so who was their former quarterback, very good quarterback for Ohio, but I just struggle to see this roster being A tier and struggle to see this program doing anything that good this year. I have them going 4-8. Will the road be kind for Sacramento State? Well, it better be, because they're going on the road a whole lot. Now, they're bringing back Carson Conklin, who started for them 2 years ago, then left and was a backup last year, now returns for the Hornets. He has not officially been announced the starter yet, so we will see there on Sac State. But if he does end up returning to his 2 years ago form, which is all right for an FCS school, they'll be right about where I have them, 3-9, but this roster could also end up being worse than that. Not a huge believer in Sac State. The organization kind of bungled it. They were originally not supposed to be in the MAC. Then they kind of lucked into being in the MAC. Then they paid a bunch of money. They're going to be like paying up front for all their travel and whatnot, which is they're just going to be spending a ton of money. So not the smartest financial moves going on there at Sac State. And they had to sacrifice, because of that, they had to sacrifice on the roster for sure as well. And so could be a rough season loading ahead there in Sacramento. Toledo is next. Toledo basically transplanted the Mercer roster from the SoCon last year and planted them right in the MAC after losing their head coach, Jason Cannell. A ton of players. Jason Cannell went off to UConn. But Mercer was a really good team in the SoCon and in the FCS in general. They have honestly moved a bunch of that roster over, and I actually really like this roster. Running back C.J. Miller is going to be a fantastic player for them. And if they open at Michigan State and are able to upset the Spartans here, the sky's the limit for for the Rockets. And because they're the Rockets, maybe space is the limit. Ever thought about that? Anyway, I have them going 10-2. UMass. You can replace that A and replace it with an E. UMass is a mess. They averaged 11.1 points per game last year. The worst, by far, in the entire country. The last time they beat an FBS squad, Joseph Biden was still our president. I have them going 2-10 and continuing to fail to beat an FBS team. Not the easiest schedule either for the Minutemen. And finally, we have my pick to be the MAC champions, again, the Western Michigan Broncos. Not only do they have running back Jalen Buckley, they also have quarterback Brock Lowry, who I think will win Player of the Year. Now, Brock Lowry was a little bit of a dink and dunk guy last year, but if he just improves to increase that, he only threw for 6.9 yards per attempt last year. If that number goes up, Western Michigan will be in a good spot to be a good team. All right, Mountain West. They reloaded with a whole bunch of teams this year, and honestly, they have a very beneficial structure with good teams and then terrible teams. There's not really a whole lot of middle in this conference. That'll probably end up serving the top quite well, and we'll get into it. Air Force. Now, Air Force is one of those teams that is in the middle, but Air Force has, again, a tough travel schedule. They do have to go to Army late in the year. They have to go to New Mexico. They should be a good team, but a brutal schedule as far as the G6 goes is not going to help them out. I have them going 7-5. They should be run heavy. Always makes me laugh that Air Force is a super run heavy team, but I do have them beating Navy at home, and so I think the Commander-in-Chief trophy will be split this year. Hawaii. Can they win at three-phase football? The offense should be very good. The defense should be pretty good. But the special teams might need some work. Some very new faces there in Hawaii. Hideki Matsuyama was the kicker last year. He was that Japanese sensation. And he graduated, so he is no longer there. If they can beat Stanford in week 0, the door opens to them for having quite a good season. They have to go to Wyoming and play at elevation there. If they can win that game and upset Arizona State on the road as well on October 10th, there is a path to the CFP there for Hawaii. This is the only team all year that I have going 0-12. And that doesn't going 0-12 does not necessarily mean they're going to be the worst team in college football. I think UMass is probably worse than them. Heck, Sac State, who I have going 3-9, might be worse than these guys. But this schedule, they did not do themselves favors. Here is the non-conference. Western Kentucky might be CUSA champion. Montana State might be FCS champion. That's a tough start. Then you go to Middle Tennessee. That's just a long road trip. Air Force at UTEP. UTEP should be a win, but the fact that you have to go at UTEP is going to be tough. At NDSU, at UCLA, New Mexico, Hawaii, UNLV. There's just not a ton of opportunities for wins, and where there are, they're usually on the road. I just don't see a strong path to this Nevada team being any good, and I have them going only defeated. New Mexico. The question I have from this year is IDH New Mexico, and that's because they took the program of Idaho 2 years ago and just flipped it down to Albuquerque and made it their own, and have done quite well doing that way. I have Jack Lane as my preseason player of the year. He played for Idaho 2 years ago. The coach, Jason Eck, played for Idaho, or coached for Idaho 2 years ago. His son is the linebacker for New Mexico, played for Idaho 2 years ago. This is going to be a very Idaho-centric team, but they got some other crucial transfers in there. This will be a team that competes for the college football playoff if they can beat Hawaii October 17th and just hang around New Mexico and just hang around at Oklahoma on September 19th. This is a team that'll be right there for the CFP. North Dakota State. Can the villains of the FCS become little folk heroes? Now, everybody loves an underdog. NDSU is now in the FBS where they are an underdog. I think they go 10-2 this season. I think they'll be quite a good squad. That Hawaii game is going to be tricky at UNLV as well, and also Jacksonville State to open the season. They should still have quite a strong defense, quite a strong culture. I like North Dakota State as they move up. I think this will not be quite as hard of a transfer up as people think. Okay, NIU, the Huskies. This is gonna be a tough. They moved from the Mountain West, or the MAC, to the Mountain West. Not a very good move. Iowa, they have to play to open the season. They have to play at Arizona. They have to go to Georgia State. They have to go to Wyoming. Now they do have Hawaii coming to town, depending on weather. That could be an upset potential there. They have to go at North Dakota State. I just don't see it at all with this NIU roster. That Notre Dame game is feeling further and further and further away. San Jose State. The last 2 years, they've actually had the FBS leaders in receiving with Nick Nash, who is now a Washington Commander, as well as one of my favorite names in all of college football, Danny Scudero, who I believe now plays for Colorado. This year, there is not someone to replace that projection. So they're going to have to rely a little bit more on run-heavy football. And they do have Jabari Bates, who is a serviceable running back in that spot. But I do have at least heavy concerns about just trying to replace your system like that. And they have to open the season at USC. That's going to be a tall task. So just try to get out of that USC game at least marginally healthy. And then from there, you'll try to fight for bowl eligibility, which will be the ceiling for this team. UNLV. This is my second trendy playoff team. UNLV will not be going to the college football playoff. I don't think we'll be sniffing the college football playoff. I know there's statistics out there that says, oh, they have an easy schedule. They don't. They don't have an easy schedule. Their schedule is quite difficult. Look at this schedule. Memphis, Hawaii, Akron, Cal, NDSU, Air Force, Wyoming, New Mexico. That's like 6 losable games right there, and UNLV has not shown their prime time when it comes to big games. Jackson Arnold, he got benched last year at Auburn. Do we just forget that? I don't. I think this team is going to be closer to 7-5 than they are going to be to 10-2. Now, Jet Thomas is still the running back there. He will be good, but the fan support there in Vegas is still poorer than I like. UTEP. UTEP is rather UTEPid when it comes to putting up a good football team from year to year. sometimes they strike gold. The Miners strike gold and come up with something all right. Most of the time, they're just thoroughly mid, and occasionally, they're pretty bad. This is going to be the third category. They're going to be pretty bad. I have them beating Texas Southern and beating Nevada. Other than that, it's going to be a rough year there in El Paso. The only solace is they do get to play in the Sun Bowl. That must be a cool feeling. 2-10 is my projection. The impact player I think this year will be Jaden Wilson, a linebacker again, defensive organizer. They are in a new conference, I should point out. Last year, they were in Conference USA. They jumped ship to join the new Mountain West. Will that move be beneficial? I feel like that is likely unlikely. All right, finally in the Mountain West, Wyoming. Now, this is the third year for Coach Jay Sabel. He is only 7-17. That is far below the standard of Wyoming. They went just 4-8 last year. This year, I think they'll be a little bit better. Home field advantage matters a ton. They start out with a border war against Colorado State, and then they also have to play Central Michigan and Northern Colorado in the non-con. Now, Northern Colorado is actually typically a pretty tough out as far as the FCS goes, but again, that's a home game. Home field matters a ton for Wyoming. They do host some of the worst teams in the conference, so that'll be definitely a boon to them. I think they'll be in the mid-tier, right there with Air Force, and go 7-5, and again, be run heavy there for the Cowboys. All right, Pac-12 time. The Pac is back. Or are they truly back? If they are, they're going to send a team to the college football playoff because they have the best teams that were not previously in power conferences from the west side of the country, all competing in there. A very good conference. And let me explain what they've done. So you might be noticing here on this Boise State graphic that on November 28th, so rivalry week, so to speak, I have it listed as flex. What does that mean, Nate? Well, the Pac-12 only has 8 teams in football, and they play an 8-team conference schedule. Problem? Yes, because that means you can only play, if you played every team once, you only have 7 conference games. Well, the Pac-12 decides what your last game of the season is, last regular season game is. So if Boise State needed a resume builder, they might throw them Colorado State or San Diego State or Texas State. They can choose. The conference can choose who the last game of the season is, which will be absolutely fantastic. If Boise State can just hang around against Oregon at the start of the season, the entire rest of that schedule falls pretty favorably for them. If they can knock off Memphis at home and then play well and win at Western Michigan, I really like their odds to make the college football playoff. Okay, this might be a little bit of a rough season for the Colorado State Rams. Jim Mora left UConn to come here. That shows the strength of the Pac-12, but it's going to take a little bit to get the momentum re-rolling there from the UConn days, just because it's such a shift in culture. They do have Tommy Maher coming over too, the wide receiver, the impact player there. But the question is, does UConn equal the Pac-12? And UConn was an independent last year. They had several games that were far easier than what they're going to have to face in this Pac-12 schedule, which, again, should be far and away the best G6 conference. But I think it's just going to be a little bit of a tough year for Colorado State. Okay, Fresno State. Fresno State is going to have, again, a tough schedule. That's pretty much the standard in this conference. There's going to be a whole pack of teams that are going to be right between 4-7 to 7-4 here in the Pac-12. This is going to be one of them. If they can compete well against USC, I think this is a team that can maybe head to the Pac-12 title game, but they're going to have some things to break well. That still should be quite a good secondary. They have a very good defensive line, have a good secondary. Linebackers, a little bit more of a question. I have nickelback Simeon Harris there, who was an absolute ball hawk for him last year as their impact player. Oregon State. Can the Beavers get organizationally aligned when even your head coach says we could be in for some tough, rough patches this year? You might be in for some rough patches that year. Houston and Texas Tech to open the season is brutal, and then you chase that with one of the better teams in the FCS in Montana. That is just a very difficult way to start the season. Rebounding from that, I think Oregon State could be all right. They had a little bit of a surprise when they named Braden Atkinson their quarterback, beating out Malik Murphy for the job. I was definitely surprised to see that. But if the coaching staff thinks he's the best option, then you go with your best option. All right, San Diego State. This is about as big of a G6 gauntlet as you can get. So they start with an FCS squad in Portland State. That should be an easy win. And then you go at UCLA versus JMU at Toledo. That is a tough 3-game stretch where you play JMU and Toledo, who will both be competing for their respective conference championships. If you can somehow make it out of that non-conference 3-1, then you might have a shot, and then beat Boise State maybe twice. Then you might have an outside shot at the CFP. Running back Lucky Sutton is their impact player. He is going to get the lion's share of the total touches this year for San Diego State. They're going to be a run-heavy team. Last year they showed they could have true momentum, but they're going to have to be consistent from week to week this year. But I think this is going to be a team that's in fringe CFP discussions come November. Pac-12 has the air raid back, and it's via Texas State, the last member who joined. Texas State should be a lot of fun. Their impact player is Bo Sparks, who will be the wide receiver 1 for the air raid, so expect him to put up crazy numbers. They actually put a lot of pressure on their first game of the season when they go to Texas. Hopefully, they scared that Texas secondary a little bit, because I think that would be absolutely hilarious to see right at the start of the season. This should be a team that, if they can gel, they just have a lot of transfers. If they can gel, they'll be pushing for bowl eligibility. If not, they'll be right about where I have them at 4-7. All right. Utah State. Now, Utah State is typically a good program. This year, I don't see that. I disliked their portal class. And quite frankly, even their impact player, wide receiver Anthony Garcia, he is wide receiver 1. He'd be a wide receiver 2 at most Pac-12 schools. Now, Robert Ane and Bronco Mendenhall are the coaches. They did coach for years and years at Virginia, who actually got to an Orange Bowl under them. But does that same system still work in the current era of college football? I certainly have my questions. I have them going 2-9 and being the worst team in this year's iteration of the Pac-12. Finally, in the Pac-12, we have Washington State. They open the season at Washington and at Kansas State. And then September 26th, they host Arizona. So a relatively brutal non-conference. I think the ceiling this year for the Cougs is right about bowl eligibility, but the floor is also right about bowl eligibility. That's just what Washington State's going to have to be. They're going to have to be adaptive, a little bit of a feeder school for some of the bigger programs, and sometimes competing for a Pac-12 title, which is unfortunate. But just the resources, which I know they're building back, it's going to be tough in Pullman unless they can get a really good coach. And I like what they have on this roster. Matters McLean will lead the defensive side of things, but I just don't feel strongly about Washington State's total roster this year. Still a lot of holes and a tough midseason stretch where you have to play at Oregon State, and then you host Boise State, and then you go to San Diego State. So I think if they can come away with one of those, they'll definitely be bowl eligible. If not, they're going to be right about where I have them. All right, the SEC is next. The SEC is the only graphic in this entire slideshow that does not have a question, because the SEC knows that a question will not cut it in this current era. Actually, it would, but they have to have an objective because they're different. Their objective is to win a championship, because if they don't, there's going to be a lot of questions this offseason, I'll tell you that. And I think the player of the year is going to be quarterback Trinidad Chambliss. I think he might be the best player in the sport as of this current moment from a total production perspective from what he did at the D2 level and then again last year. Alrighty, starting with Alabama. Now, for any good team, you have two questions answered. Your quarterback and your running game. Alabama doesn't have either of those questions answered. I have some real concerns over the Crimson Tide this year, but their first 5 games are super doable, and if they can just continue to be Georgia's bugaboo, and they can knock off Tennessee on the road, and they can knock off Texas A&M at home, I kind of see the vision this year for the Tide. There is a path to 11-3. There's also 11-1. There's also a path to 7-5, which is quite unfortunate, honestly, for the Tide. And I just don't feel as sure about them beating a team like South Carolina or Mississippi State or Vanderbilt as I previously did. Now, if they can still beat Auburn at season's end, that's probably still a win for them. But Kalen DeBoer came there to compete for the SEC, not to be 9-3. And so if this prediction holds true, there may be some issues there in Tuscaloosa. Arkansas, their mission is simple this year. Can they win the respect of the public? Because right now, the public heavily disrespects Arkansas, and it's for good reason. Arkansas, I think they went 2-10 last year, and they didn't win any big profile games. The year before that, they were 4-8. Like, Arkansas hasn't been good, nor have they been relevant here in about 4 years. Now, if they could flip that around and beat some SEC opponents down the stretch, I could start to see Arkansas picking up some momentum, picking up some transfers in the next cycle. Ryan Silverfield could get this thing rolling, but for the current moment, they just have to pull an upset against one of these teams. They also have to go to Utah in the non-con, and that is going to be absolutely brutal. They do have Quincy Rhodes there on the defensive side of things. Quincy Rhodes is a nice player, should be an NFL player, but he's not. When you see the rest of these impact players in the SEC, you're going to see that Arkansas is significantly trailing behind quite a few of them, including running back for Auburn, Jeremiah Cobb, who returns after quite a productive season last year. Now, if I told you that Auburn hasn't won the Iron Bowl since 2019, when Mac Jones was the backup quarterback for Alabama, would you have believed me? Probably not. But here we are, and they have to go to Tuscaloosa this year. I don't see them winning at Alabama, but they could. They opened the season pretty favorably. Atlanta versus what should be at best a mediocre Baylor team, as well as taking on Southern Miss at home. If they can beat them, then they have Florida at home and Vanderbilt at home. There's definitely a path to 4-0. Unfortunately, after that, it gets a lot harder. But I still have Auburn making bowl eligibility and going 7-5, which would be a definite win for Alex Golesh, Byron Brown in their first year on the Plains. Florida. Did Florida get the right guy? Quite simple. And we'll definitely start to find out the answer this year. John Summerall comes over from Tulane to be the coach at UF. Running back Jaden Baugh could be one of the best, if not the best running back in the SEC this year. We just don't know about the rest of that roster. Aaron Philon is the QB there. He is an unknown quantity coming over from Georgia Tech. He was not the starter for them last year. So we shall see on the Gators. Definite question marks across multiple places, as well as a tough schedule. Doesn't give me overly a lot of confidence in the Gators this year, but I'd like to like them, if you know what I mean. I have Florida going 7-5. A team I have better than Florida is their rival Georgia. The question for Georgia this year is glory, glory, Gunner. Because if Georgia is going to be singing glory, glory a lot this year, it's going to be because of Gunner Stockton. Gunner Stockton, the QB for Georgia. He is now in his senior season. It feels like not that long ago. He was just the backup for Georgia heading into the Sugar Bowl against Notre Dame, a game they ended up losing. And coming in relief of Carson Beck in that SEC championship game. And now he is full-fledged starter, potential Heisman candidate. And so Gunnar Stockton is going to have to lead this Georgia squad through a couple of tough games. But as far as an SEC schedule goes, it gets pretty manageable at the start, and at the end, it's pretty difficult in the middle. I do have them dropping one at Ole Miss, but other than that, I think Georgia should be right about where they're usually at. All right, Will Stein comes over and makes Kentucky not necessarily Oregon light, but Oregon live. This is a very toned down system of what Oregon typically ran there, and now he's at Kentucky, Will Stein is. And it's going to be a tough road to rebuild this program. Kentucky famously doesn't invest a ton into football. I have them going 3-9, but the roster still has a lot of holes, and SEC schedules are notably tough. And with 9 games this year, bowl eligibility would be a huge win if Kentucky got to there. All right, LSU, the most contentious team in college football. They have Trey Green and now Daquan Wright as well in the tight end position. I have them going 8-4. And you might be thinking, only 8-4, Nate? Well, yeah, I'm just not that high as far as CFP odds go for LSU. How well does everybody transferring in work? How well does an off-season where you had nothing but chaos work? How well is Lane Kiffin still top-tier elite in a first-year setting? I just think our expectations are too high this year for Baton Rouge. And so I have LSU going 8-4 against what's a pretty difficult schedule, in my opinion. Now, Death Valley at night, still going to be a brutal weapon. They'll use it to knock off Clemson early, but I have them dropping that game at Ole Miss, and then immediately following that up with Texas A&M is going to be a tough one. And so a 2-2 start is just going to lead to things not spiraling, but slowly slipping away from them. I have them going 8-4 overall. All right, Mississippi State should actually be fairly exciting. Now, I know that's not their logo anymore, but I needed to bring it back just to point to the attention that the A is not centered in the M, which is constantly annoying me, and so therefore I must bring it back on the graphic. Anyway, this is going to be a slightly improved Mississippi State team. I have them being bowl eligible. I know a lot of people don't, but I really like Camario Taylor. He's going to have to be super Camario for them to actually hit this projection this year. But it's there. It's theirs for the taking. They have South Carolina early. They have Missouri. They have Vandy. They have Auburn. And they have Tennessee Tech and ULM as well. All of those are winnable games. They just need to win. If they can avoid dropping any of those, they'll be 6-6. If they do drop one, which is possible, they can upset. I think they can upset Alabama or LSU or Oklahoma or Texas or Ole Miss and still make it to bowl eligibility. I wouldn't be surprised if they're right around 4-8. But it can be there. It can be there for this year for Jeff Levy and State. Okay. SEC time. SEC light. SEC don't really want this team to be in the SEC time. SEC, is Missouri very good? Or is Missouri mid? Or is Missouri bad? Because as much as SEC fans like to discount Missouri, they do like to beat your teams an awful lot. But this year I have Missouri being rather mediocre. I think they start the season strong with Arkansas Pine Bluff, but then they have to go to Kansas. That's always a tough one. I haven't just been generally mid. They knock off the middle tier of the conference. They're not going to be able to knock off the top end of the conference, except for the last game of the season where I have them beating Oklahoma. We just didn't have enough chaos last November, and so I think they're able to beat Oklahoma. Oklahoma may still end up making the playoffs anyway, because you know, you can go 9-3 in the SEC and make the playoffs with the expanded 9-game schedule. I think that could be a definite possibility. Speaking of Oklahoma, I think their season goes really well. I think they actually knock off Texas at the Cotton Bowl. But going to Georgia is going to be a tough game. Most of the other big games, though, are at home. The thing with Oklahoma is with hosting, well, they do go to Michigan. They do go to the Big House in week 2. But the thing is, they could easily, by the time Halloween rolls around, be either 6-0 and the number 1 team in the country, or 3-3 and be completely out of it. The truth is usually in the middle. I think it will be here. But John Mateer, I think, will be quite a good quarterback for him this year if he can stay healthy. And so I have the Sooners at 9-3. The recently extended Brett Venables there for Oklahoma. All right, Pete Golding and Ole Miss. One of the biggest stories of this year. One of the biggest games of this year will be them rolling in, or hosting, I should say, at Vaught Hemingway in Oxford, Mississippi. LSU, if they can win that game, the whole season opens up for them. I have them going 10-2 and making the playoff, as I mentioned a couple weeks ago. Trinidad Chambliss and Keywan Lacey. It's a heck of a 1-2 punch there at quarterback and running back. Probably the best 1-2 punch in the country. So the offense is going to be incredible. The question is the defense still going to be as good as they were last year? If they are, Ole Miss will be right in that same position where they were last year as far as quarterfinals/semifinals go in CFP. Lenora Sellers and Nick Harbor bring South Carolina into yet another season, trying to save their coach Shane Beamer's job. Now, they should have a pretty good offense. That defense is not going to be great. But the question is, how well can they do in Cocktober? Because in Cocktober, they play 4 games. Now, if you don't know, South Carolina has their month, Cocktober. They're actually very bad in October, but, Gamecock, Cocktober, it's got to be that. So, they play first Kentucky, at Florida, versus Tennessee, at Oklahoma. If they can go 3-1 there, they could probably qualify for a pretty nice bowl game, or at least a mediocre bowl game. I have them missing the bowl, but I could see a scenario where South Carolina could be as good as 8-4, but no better than that. All right, Tennessee. This is probably where I disagree with 99% of the country. I was listening to the Josh Pate CFB show the other day, and he says, when I look at Tennessee, I could easily pencil in 7 wins. I'm sorry, what? Where? All right, okay, I'll give you Furman. I'll give you rebuilding Kennesaw State. I'll give you Kentucky. And I will give you absolutely nobody else. I will give you 3 penciled in wins. And honestly, as far as these toss-up games go, I just don't like it. At Georgia Tech, you think you're going to Atlanta and just winning that game? I don't think so. Texas? Really? Auburn? Really? At Arkansas? Really? I mean, hosting a Bama team that's definitely better than you? Like, I know you still have Deshaun Bishop as your RB. I know Fajon Brandon, everybody's excited about, but he is a freshman. I don't like this Tennessee roster at all. I would think right now, if I had to pick a coach from absolutely nowhere to get fired, it would be Josh Heupel. He wouldn't deserve it, even if they did go 4-8. But if that would be my surprise pick. I think the wheels fall off the bus here at the end of the season. I have Tennessee going 4-8. I know that's surprising to most people. I don't necessarily care. I think I'm going to be closer to being right. I think the Tennessee ceiling is going to be right about 6-6. I think I'm going to be closer to being right about 4-8 than Tennessee will be to the college football playoff, even if they have a far better season than I think they will. Texas, will they go bust again? Okay, so quite frankly, the last 2 years, last year specifically, but the last 2 years, if we include, well, actually 2 years ago they did make the semifinal, but it's been disappointing for Texas considering the money they've spent. They should be going to the title game or even winning the title with the money they're spending, with who they're bringing in. This is the best roster yet. They've probably spent the most in the sport, but Cam Coleman comes over from Auburn. Still have Trey Wingo. Hollywood Smothers is your running back. Arch Manning is your QB. That defense is absolutely loaded. It is natty or bust, but the schedule is tough. Ohio State's on there. Oklahoma's on there. Ole Miss is on there. At LSU is on there. At Texas A&M is on there. 5 easily losable games. That is 5 potentially top 10 games. That is, it's going to be a tough road ahead for Texas, but I just think they're better than most of the competition. I think they go 11-1 and make the SEC championship game here again. Texas A&M. The question is, can they avoid collapsing late? The early part of the schedule is very manageable. If they can go to Baton Rouge and win, which I have them doing on September 26th, then you kind of feel pretty good until rolling into Alabama on October 24th. But Bryant-Denny doesn't have the same aura it did just a few years ago. And then it gets a little easier again until, the end of the season gets absolutely brutal. You finish at Oklahoma and versus Texas. Texas has been your absolute daddy, either home or away. Hasn't seemed to matter recently. And so when they played really good teams last year, Texas A&M fell apart. This year, I wouldn't be surprised for the same story to happen over again. All right. And finally, we have Vanderbilt. Will life post-Pavia be rough on Vandy? Yeah, definite possibility. Blaze Burowitz is going to start the season for Vanderbilt as quarterback. Vandy has a 5-star quarterback in Jared Curtis on their roster. He is a freshman. They will not be playing him. Vanderbilt has a 5-star quarterback on their roster, and he will not be their starter. What kind of upside-down world is this? No, it's going to be Blaze Burowitz, who was backing up Pavia and also played at New Mexico State in a different time period. Burowitz could be quite a good player. The schedule is obviously difficult. The non-conference is doable. Austin Peay, Delaware, NC State, all winnable. But not a whole lot of very winnable games once you get into SEC play. Some of the so-called easier games you'll see are going to be on the road, although I do think they knock off Tennessee again at season's end. If you remember 2 years ago, Vanderbilt was leading, I think, that game by 17 before they kind of mini collapsed. And then last year they ended up running away from Tennessee and winning that game on the road. So I think with Sean Alexander still there for Vanderbilt, that could be quite a good roster, quite a good team, and they could potentially, I think the ceiling is bowl eligibility once again there for Vandy. All right, finally, the last conference is the Sun Belt. And the question for the Sun Belt is, did James Madison pave the pathway for the Sun Belt to be competing for the college football playoff year after year after year? My preseason pick for player of the year is the quarterback Goose Crowder. Goose is technically not his real name, but I'm just going to continue to call him Goose because that's amazing. All right, App State has unfortunately been sliding back as a program. Ever since that win against Texas A&M a couple years back, they just continue to get worse and worse and worse on a year basis. I would like to see, I feel like pretty much everybody likes to see App State being good, just because we have fond memories of, them beating Texas A&M and obviously in 07 Michigan. And we liked them when they were FCS dominant, and when they came up to FBS, we liked them even more. They nearly knocked off UNC in a crazy game a couple years back as well. College football likes it when App State is good. This is probably not the best roster App State's had in the last decade, but it's only tougher for an App State school, which is very good about finding diamonds in the rough and then developing them in the transfer portal era. That's brutal to maintain to do, and so App State has got to find a way to meet the present somehow. I have them going 6-6 as an all-right team in the Sun Belt. Sun Belt still does East-West, which is surprising to me, but I mean, I guess some conferences still do it. So Sun Belt is the only conference that still has divisions. And then it's Coastal Carolina. Coastal Carolina still plays on the teal turf. I think Coastal is in much the same boat. Now, they do like to call themselves the Mullets, and now they have a coach named Chris Beard. Not the basketball coach, but his name is Beard, which the Mullets having a coach named Beard, hilarious. Anyway, Coastal Carolina has a difficult non-conference, having to play Liberty and Delaware and West Virginia. That does not set up their season particularly well. I think the defense will be all right, led by Savion McDowell, but it's not the easiest Sun Belt schedule, compounded with the non-conference. It's going to be a tough year there in Conway. 4-8 I have for the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers. Georgia Southern, can they show resilience in what's been a tough last 4 years? And they've made a bowl every single year, but they've gone 6-6, 6-6, 6-6, 6-6. This roster is set up to be right about there. If they can pull an upset against one of the better teams, or so-called better teams in the Sun Belt, I have them going 6-6 as well. They had most of their players leave in the transfer portal. They did hold on to wide receiver Josh Dallas, who was a very good player, just often injured. Georgia Southern is going to be right about bowl eligibility once again this year. Georgia State, this is a rough job. I know it's in Atlanta. Other than that, Georgia State is always just, I know they knocked off Tennessee about 7 years back. Other than that, they just kind of cruise since they joined being a football program. They just kind of cruise under the radar, and they don't pick up too many big wins. That's not true, actually. They did beat Vanderbilt, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. So they do have 2 SEC wins in the last 7 years, but they just don't have a big name on their roster this year. The only big one they play is at UCF. And this has been a team that has just been absolutely dreadful in conference the last couple of years. And this year I have them going 3-9. I just don't quite see it this year with the Georgia State Panthers. All right, JMU. JMU was in the playoff last year. I feel like that's not stated enough. JMU was a team from Harrisonburg, Virginia, made the college football playoff last year. This year, they actually bring in Billy Napier, who was fired from Florida. He has already proven himself quite well at the G5 level. I think he could be quite a good coach for JMU, actually. If they can beat Liberty early, there's a path. We can begin to have another conversation about this JMU team as far as national goes. If they can beat Old Dominion, then this is a team that's going to compete again for the Sun Belt East title and the Sun Belt Conference Championship in general. All right, Marshall. Are they seen and heard? Thundering heard. Marshall's going to run a lot of speed RPO option this year. They have a dual threat quarterback in Carlos Del Rio Wilson, and a schedule which means that they can have flexibility. They'll play at Penn State. The rest of the non-con schedule is doable. And then once they get into the conference schedule, if they can pick off some teams like Old Dominion and pick off some teams like Georgia Southern, this could be a team that competes for the Sun Belt East. But they got some big games against JMU and ODU early in October, and that'll be a tough month of October. If they can come away with that with a good record intact, they too can push for the Sun Belt East title. Finally, in the Sun Belt East, we have Old Dominion, who recently changed their logo, unfortunately, and now it looks a lot worse. But their entire season for Old Dominion hangs on that game against James Madison. This is going to be a really good roster headed up by Devin Roche. I love the transfer portal class they brought in. If they can win that home game, they're going to play Virginia Tech early. That'll likely be a loss. I know they often beat the Hokies. That'll likely be a loss this time. If they can beat JMU at home on September 26th, the rest of that conference schedule is super doable. They should win the Sun Belt East. If they can do that, they'll be on the fringe conversation. They'll need some breaks to go their way. They'll be on the fringe conversation for the CFP, just like JMU was last year. All right, Arkansas State, that'll begin the Sun Belt West. Last year's Xbox Bowl champions. You don't just come away from the Xbox Bowl feeling like you're a nothing program. You're ready to compete in the Sun Belt this year, except they're not really. I do like Butch Jones still. I think he's a good football coach. I know it didn't work out in Tennessee, but I think he's a good football coach. And he got handed a trophy from Master Chief last year, so that's a huge confidence booster. I think Arkansas State, if they can somehow go to Memphis and win Week 1, obviously TCU, that's probably not in their price range there. If they can go to Memphis and win in Week 1, their season sets up all right. But this will probably just be a fringe bowl team. All right. Louisiana. ULL. Now, you might be noticing that question at the top of the graphic. Are they packed lunch? And that's a good question. Why did I phrase it like that? Well, their quarterback's name is Lunch Winfield, a dual threat guy. Actually have pretty good roster retention there at Louisiana as well. This should be a half-decent team. I have them going 8-4. Some tough games there. Feature a game at home against Troy. They also go to USC on September 12th. Another litmus test game. USC plays a lot of litmus test games, both for them and for their opponents. If ULL can hang around at the Coliseum there on September 12th, we could see them be a team that kind of challenges Troy for the Sun Belt West crown. A team that will not be challenging for the Sun Belt West crown is Louisiana Tech, who recently moved from Conference USA to join the Sun Belt and join their two of their Louisiana brethren there in Louisiana Monroe. But this is not a great team. Now, the defense might end up being all right. Colby Fields is their impact player. The secondary has some continuity returning, but other than that, this offense is probably not going to be very good, and the schedule is not easy. 3 of the non-con games are against Army, LSU, and Baylor as well. So not a fantastic start there for LA Tech. As far as the end of the season goes, there's some more manageable games down there, but I have them tapping out at 3-9. All right, Major Applewhite leads South Alabama into his third season. Now, the question is, can he turn a corner? The last 2 years have not been great, and there's definitely some growing pains when you're a first-time head coach. But South Alabama did not have a great portal class. They definitely lost more than they gained, and so those players that they did retain, like quarterback Bishop Davenport, they're going to have to step up and have an even better year. So a major year ahead for South Alabama. If South Alabama does not turn a corner this year, I don't see Major Applewhite, unfortunately, keeping his job for much longer. I have him going 4-8 with some losses there, picking up against Troy. Some wins. I have him beating Ohio, not Ohio State, Ohio, ULM, and Louisiana Tech. All right, USM. USM is an interesting case study this year. They lost basically everybody. Coach, players, backup cornerbacks, starting quarterbacks. Basically everybody left, except one 7th-year player, Broderick Roman, the center. He stuck around for some reason. I guess just because he loved the program that much. So Hadesburg has 99% turnover and 1% continuity. But I actually like some of the players they did bring in. This is going to be a team whose ceiling is just merely bowl eligibility, but year one of a rebuild, always tough. But I like what Southern Miss is bringing now that Brett Favre isn't hemorrhaging money away from them. True story if you want to look it up. I think their non-conference is pretty tough, but they can definitely be a team that'll compete in the Sun Belt. All right, Troy. We're down to our final two teams here. Troy is going to try to make the CFP this year. Now, this is a Troy team that is finally going all in. They made sure their non-conference featured some easier teams. Utah State, Alabama State, Sam Houston, all winnable. And then on September 19th, this is kind of where their season hinges on. They go to Missouri to play a night game in Columbia. If they can win, and Troy has gone to SEC schools and won before, if they can win, this is going to be a team that competes for the college football playoff. Their only other extremely tough game the entire rest of the season is at James Madison. So if they can avoid upsets and maybe knock off Missouri, they could even potentially absorb a loss to JMU. And if they're 11-1 and win the Sun Belt, this is going to be a team that is definitely in college football playoff discussions. It's going to be a tough road ahead for Troy, but the Trojans are in that fringe G6 category, which could make it potentially to the CFP. Finally, and I'm quite frank with this one, it's ULM. Do they even care? Does that organization even care? Because it sure doesn't feel like it. They did bring back Aiden Armenta, their QB. Other than that, very, very few players did they return. They didn't really even try in the transfer portal. The schedule is at best meh. And even with that meh schedule, I still don't see them picking up too many wins. They do play at Mississippi State. That's their only Power 4 conference game. So it just feels like we're leaving ULM a little bit to die here. There's definitely been some rumblings about them changing down to FCS. If you ever want to look at that stadium, very interestingly built too, does not look like an FBS stadium. And so I'm sorry to say this to the Sickos committee, who are huge ULM fans, but they're going 2-10, and that's probably one of the better case scenarios as well. I know a lot of people don't even have them winning a single Sun Belt game. Well, that does it. That is 138 FBS teams. Spent just about a minute on every single team. All FBS teams are now covered. Even got to some FCS teams a little bit as well there throughout the schedule. Every single game covered. So if you liked what I did here, please consider subscribing and liking, or if you're listening on Spotify, if you want to follow there as well. I put out content throughout the season. We're going to be going live 3 days a week. Mondays at 11 p.m. Eastern. Thursdays we'll announce times as they go, and then Saturday nights after the big games wrap up on that day throughout the college football season, which kicks off, as I would like to repeat, in 2 games. So I will talk to you all Saturday night, probably right about midnight Eastern. We'll go live, and so that I will talk to you then. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope your team is successful this year. Goodbye.